Well, hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Joseph, one of your pastors. Delighted to have you here joining us yet again, and delightful in this season of Advent and Christmas. And we're talking about what makes Christmas Christmas. And so I'm delighted here to have my friend, parishioner, church member, Madge Watson as a guest on the show today. Glad to have you with us, Madge.
It is my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And Madge and I have known each other for quite some time, since I've started being here on church staff 6 years and a bit ago. And today we're going to be talking about, again, the topic of what makes Christmas Christmas in the season of Advent and anticipation of the birth of Christ, talking about generosity and how we give of ourselves, what that does for us, what that does for others, and how God is at work through all of that. Before we get into those topics, I did want to ask a little bit, this is my standard question for people on the podcast. So who are you and how'd you wind up here at Oak Grove? So Madge, take it away.
Well, I'm just a simple child of God from a little country town called Slocum, Alabama, originally.
Oh, yeah.
Down in the, what we're called the tri-state area, 6 miles from the Florida line, about 15 miles or 30 miles from the Georgia line. And we were a farm of cotton, peanuts, tomatoes in today's world, farming village. And I think probably we had about 1,000 people, 2 stoplights. We all sat on the front porch and waved at each other as we grew up. I could walk literally to the church because it was no further than out our door to the end of the Etheridge playground.
Oh, wow.
My father was the organist at the church for 50-something years, and church was a big part of life then, as it is now. Been in Atlanta for, 50-something years now, close to 55, I think, at least.
Okay.
And it now is home, and just delighted to be here. I had a little venture in college of trying the Episcopal church for a little while. But you know what I missed? I missed my good Methodist music. And had some wonderful neighbors, still do, called the Adams family that attended at Oak Grove.
Okay.
And I started coming to Oak Grove United Methodist Church. And it was good to get back to my roots as such, because I've been a Methodist all my life, except for that little experiment with the Episcopal Church.
And it's all part of, again, in the Methodist world, we Methodists come out of the Church of England. We're sort of unofficially a part of the Anglican family across the world. And so the brothers, Charles and John Wesley, Chuck and J-Dubs, as they call them, they don't call them that, but they were Anglican priests who wanted to renew the Church of England. And they got called names and all sorts of things because they had this pattern and system, these methods of life. And they called them the Methodists, which was sort of a mean term, but they said, that sounds good. I think we'll be the Methodists. I know you're involved in a lot here, but tell me the things you're involved here in Oak Grove and things you love.
Well, Oak Grove provides me it provides all of us many opportunities to be involved in doing God's work. I grew up, back then it was the Women's Society of Christian Service, called the WSCS, like serving the little Slocum women in my grandmother's living room as a child. I mean, like as a 3 or 5-year-old child, as soon as I could handle a plate. So that's the WSCS, which of course the United Methodist Women and now United Women in Faith, has just always been very important to me. And that is one of the first ways that I really got intricately involved here. God intervened, and one day they said to me, would you mind being co-president of the UMW?
Sure.
With Zoe Hicks.
Yeah.
I knew who Zoe was, but I didn't really know Zoe. And I said, if she says yes, I'd be delighted to. Yeah. And that is a story all in itself that the podcast doesn't have time for. We did some wonderful things on some mission trips, as we all know, building the Liberian School, and some things since then. And from that, it just one thing led to another. Our Sunday school class is called the New Vision class, and we've kind of held together, about 30 years now and so forth. Yeah. We've had a couple of romances happen and a couple of weddings in the old days, not recently, but in the original days. We've been everywhere from the old building that no longer stands to a children's room where we all sat in little chairs And then they finally gave us a regular room. They decided we were worth keeping.
It was nice of the church to give you real chairs.
Right,
That's
right.
good.
I finally requested one.
As somebody who spends a lot of time in small children's chairs with a 4-year-old, 9-year-old, I understand that. And when the church did the new addition in 2016, finishing it out, and had a classroom built for you with you all in mind, and so it's on the new wing of the building. And wonderful class, great conversations, and always receiving folks. If you're interested in Sunday school, by the way, reach out to me. I'll be glad to connect you with some of these folks. If you're interested in Madge's class, come check it out as well. Now, one of the first things you and I did together when I started working here was we made a video project. Do you remember that?
Was this the one when we were building the church and we were hurting for parking spaces?
We were trying to figure out more parking spaces, and the narrative of this epic tale was Madge pulling up in the barbecue parking lot, which is the far southern parking lot, and walking all the way in like on an epic trek all the way into the sanctuary. You had zip-off pants on. It was actually the summer. It was hot, and the idea was help fund the parking fund so we don't have to have Madge walk so far for church. It was kind of fun.
It was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun.
And this is my first 4 weeks here, and I remember just thinking, well, if this Madge can do all these things and have fun and make fun of it and enjoy it, then we're going to be all right. Yeah. So, and we've had many adventures since then.
We have.
But I love learning from you and how you help people get connected in the church. I see that as a real value for a part of your own experience and feeling welcomed and included in the church, but also wanting other people to have that. And that's, again, one of our values here at Oak Grove is an inclusive church community where people find that place to connect and grow and live. That's what the podcast, the first season was all about, the vision. Well, Madge, I'm glad for folks in the podcast to get to know you a little bit. And if they see you and know you, introduce yourself, say hello to Madge. Just known as Madge, which is good. That's easy. I think you're the only Madge I know of.
Well, I've only known about 2. I was named for my grandmother.
Oh, I was going to ask that question.
Yeah,
okay.
Named for my grandmother.
That's beautiful. And one of our daughters is named for my grandmother, so I like that. Well, we're looking at, again, what makes Christmas Christmas? Like, what makes this season, not just the warm and fuzzy, but the meaningful, not just the nostalgia, but the actual parts that make it real as we anticipate the birth of Christ in Advent, and then we celebrate that love come down to earth in the bleak midwinter, the birth of Jesus on Christmas Eve. And so, for you, is there something that makes Christmas Christmas, either in the past or now, that's like one of your main things?
Outside of the birth of Jesus, like it really boiled down to family growing up, because not only was named for my grandmother, but she lived my grandfather about 3 houses from our house, and I lived in a house that was built by my great grandfather. Wow. Everyone came to grandmother's, so it was just a festive time of family, and I could literally go out in the street in front of our house and look up the street to my grandmother's, and I'd go out and just yell and jump and scream, the hearts are here, the woods are here, because I could see their cars in the front yard. So it was just an exciting time of family togetherness, that everybody made an effort. Part of it, the reason they probably came was my grandmother was a fabulous cook. And food was a big part of our Christmas celebration. There's no doubts about it.
Yeah. Anywhere Methodists are gathered, there shall be food, which is a blessing for all of us. Yeah. Part of the success of our Wednesday night dinners at church, people say, how is that so successful? I say, well, we have an excellent chef.
Absolutely.
So shout out for Chef Allison. And next semester, if you're interested in Wednesday night dinners, you should sign up. You don't have to cook it or clean it. It caps out with family pricing, about $30 a family, which is you can't beat. And there's some delightful humans there.
Right.
You could also check out the midweek 5 p.m. communion service, which you're also a part of at the church.
I am.
That meets every Wednesday at 5 p.m., a short 35-minute service of song, prayer, short homily sermon, and then Holy Communion before folks head to dinner. So the food part of it, I think definitely for many of us at Christmas time, there are certain foods that bring that to us. And it sometimes is not so much the food, but the warmth, the food and the encirclement of being around a table. My mother-in-law talks about having all the toes under the table. Yes. And that's one of her images for that. For my mom, I know having everyone there looking around and seeing everybody in one glance is just a really meaningful thing. Not always possible every time, and all of us who have been through the pandemic season even more appreciate
because of those missed years that we couldn't be together.
Yeah. And many of the folks that we miss around our tables now as we get older and experience those losses, but also those remembrances, that sense of gathering around the table together with people really does sort of tie it in for us. Yeah. But the food part of it is also important. One of my ways of getting to know you is watching and seeing how you have been generous and kind. And we were talking in a conversation before the podcast about how generosity is not something you can necessarily like intentionally do, but being a generous person, it just sort of flows out of you. Now, you can certainly work in our Christian life about loving other people and loving God, and sure. But then there's also a point in our lives and our maturity as Christians where it just sort of flows out of us, that God's Spirit on our good days is working through and in us, sometimes in spite of us, and flowing out in a way that's meaningful. But I see you as somebody who is generous with your time, your attention to things, that you don't have preferences about this person or that person or this type of activity or this sort of thing. If it's walking by, you see trash, picking it up, or if it's helping run a Smart Lunch, Smart Kid program, it all is important. But the one thing I wanted to ask about in the generosity category, and this ties into some of the Southern understanding of the importance of food, but also generosity of holiday season, is it's my understanding about your delivering meat to people. So could you just share a little bit about how the tradition got started for you, about how you bring a tenderloin or meat to folks in a way that helps them around their home table around the holidays?
Well, I sound like a broken record, but again, it probably goes back to my roots, my childhood. Generally, at least probably 3 out of 5 days, my mother would hand me some kind of container and say, take this to so-and-so. And I'd either walk, because we were that small, or get on my bike, and I would deliver, whether it was soup or vegetables or fried chicken or whatever. I would deliver food to someone who was infirmed in some way. That was just part of the routine. Yeah. And so that became ingrained in me. And people did it to us in return, likewise, as we would hit some streaks or where somebody might be sick. And you just realize how nice it really is. So I think it's just was ingrained.
Yeah.
And in my mother's case, I have to say, she basically cooked it, which was the hard part. I buy mine and then pass it on. But
that's all right. The logistics of coordinating,
right?
Driving around town to see some friends and folks and deliver out of a cooler in your trunk, and coordinating those details. That's a lot to coordinate. And I'll say, as someone who has been a beneficiary of that service and that kindness, and you've written and asked how many folks will be around your table this holiday season, and when can I deliver the said meat?
My way of saying thank you to members of Oak Grove United Methodist Church who have been such a blessing to me and done so much for all of us. It's a way to say thank you for the year and look forward to the next year.
Yes. Well, it's a remarkable thing. And again, it hits all those things of like, is Slocum technically L.A., Lower Alabama?
Oh, very low. We're 6 miles from the Florida line.
Okay. So it's, if you don't know, L.A. in the South is not Los Angeles. It's Lower Alabama. Having gone to Auburn, I know these things. And I think part of what's unique about sort of Southern hospitality and culture is the main dish is a big thing. It's a big thing at any family gathering. For any of you who do this sort of gathering around your tables, is what's the main dish. The sides are also equally important in many places, but without that main dish, it sort of is what holds it together, ties it together in a way.
I have to interrupt Joseph and insert this quick story, and I'll make it quick, because what he just said is so true. And we are culturally, have our own specialties. But I asked a friend was from Florida State, who was from Schenectady, New York, which is the general home of General Electric. And her father was with GE, to come home with me one weekend. And I almost passed out when my grandmother served on the main table that day for her entree of meat, boiled pig's feet.
Oh.
But fortunately, she also had a platter of fried chicken for, my friend, because she looked at him and almost just passed out.
All the way from Schenectady to the floor.
New York to pig's feet. Anyway.
That's awesome.
It was a humorous moment if you had been there.
Well, Madge, I think that's definitely a part of your experience of generosity and how you help our church family cultivate some of that generosity. What are some other ways that our church offers people opportunities to become more generous people?
Well, fortunately, because of our just wonderful mission program that we have here, we have all opportunities often for people to be able to give in small and large ways. It's not the size of the gift. In our fundraising for food for the venues that Joseph may have mentioned, our Montclair feeding, our Spooky to Be Hungry presentation, Feed My Starving Children. All of these are just wonderful ways for us to provide for those not as fortunate as we are without causing stress, because a can of soup is the same as a piece of meat in that case. There are opportunities, all kind of opportunities. We're trying to develop now some participation in helping our veterans who are in a more advanced age and being relocated to housing. We're trying to provide for them some disaster kits for all of the natural disasters we've had of late. If you want to be involved in doing something good, Oak Grove provides the opportunity, not just once a year, but we're almost to the point, maybe not quite, but close once a month.
Yeah.
Recycled clothes, food, as I say, emergency kits. If you want to be involved, you can't at Oak Grove say there's just nothing to do.
Well, and folks can find that on our church website, ogmc.org/missions, and you can find the whole pamphlet there, all the different feeding ministries, the different categories of ministry we have throughout the year. There's also, during the season of Advent and Christmas, our Advent offering. Which goes to directly fund a lot of these missions and projects we do together as a church in partnership with our folks. And that's a huge part of what this church is about. One of the founding narratives for the modern era of Oak Grove is something we call Decision 66. That in 1966, when this neighborhood was booming, our house is a brick ranch. There's a lot of brick ranches around here from 1959, 1960. That's our life in the brick ranch world. And this neighborhood just really, really exploded. It was farmland before that, with all of the wonderful families here who've given the land for the church, thank you, and are still actively involved in the life of the church here. But during that time, the gymnasium of our current church was the sanctuary space. And in 1966, they were having 2 and 3 services packed out every Sunday morning, and people sitting in the aisles and trying to make it work. And so during that season, the church leadership discerned they wanted to build a new sanctuary. Well, it was nearly impossible to get a giant loan at that time. And so in order to get the loan, many church members came and put their mortgages as collateral on the altar and offered their homes as collateral for the church to build what is now our current sanctuary building. These were things that were not done so frequently back then. As a young person who lives in the neighborhood and has a mortgage and is working on that, I imagine the gravity and the level of generosity and trust and faith in my community and my fellow humanity and also in God to bring my mortgage up as collateral for the church to build a place for more people to be welcomed. That's the kind of generosity that we live out of as people who've moved in the neighborhood and inherited this generosity, but also for so many of our folks who are, again, a part of who were here on that day and during that season and that time, who we give thanks for.
I remember one time I helped Glenn and it may have been Sharon and Mark on the our pledge campaign, was working on our commitment cards or whatever, and talking to Jack Gilbert and Mary Lou. And Mary Lou told me, she said, You can sum it up, and one of my parishioners one time said, you just need to give until it hurts. And I thought about that later and kind of incorporated, and she didn't mean physically hurt, but just give until you realize, because if you'll give until it pinches, like maybe I won't be able to buy that new coat I thought I wanted. You really didn't need the coat anyway, you've learned. You're not hurting yourself, you're actually helping yourself. But I've always thought that was a quick give until it hurts. You think, I can't do that. I want to do it, but I just can't do that much. But try it a time or two and you'll find out it works.
Yeah, and Reverend Mary Lou Gilbert, retired many times from this church, a legend in the North Georgia Conference among clergy, is still part of our community, and she and Jack are much beloved. So I love that phrase came from her. I've heard you say that phrase, but I didn't know it came from that. Well, and there's so many ways that people give of their time, their talents, their finances, all those parts.
Absolutely. My give until it hurts is not just money.
Oh, sure.
It is definitely time and talents and ideas and energy.
And I'm so grateful that Oak Grove, again, in our vision process this past year we went through and have the new vision for the church, like we have all these folks who are bought in and understand that the good of our community relies upon us helping make that happen. That we're called by Christ in this place to be people who are more inclusive, who help people connect and grow and live out their faith. And so as a pastor, working with folks who already get that, it makes our work together wonderful and meaningful and really good.
Well, which is why the church is growing.
Yeah.
Even now, even after the pandemic, we're slowly, you can see it. Quite a few new faces every now and then. Every Sunday I see somebody new and I think, yay.
Yeah. And I was telling you before we were getting stuff set up for the podcast that I met someone who had driven by the church as a young person who moved down here for work, is in his 20s, drove by the church, saw it. Oh, that's a nice church building. Looked us up online, saw the social media things, watched a couple of worship services on YouTube, traditional and modern, and then showed up to the 8:30 traditional service for a couple of Sundays in between and said, hey, you're Joseph, aren't you? So there's
that's a 20-year-old, you heard him say.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of, I tell people often the folks joining Oak Grove are people that are in my demographic. I'm 40 now, so who are maybe a little younger than me, who are starting to have families and both parents working, or one working and one working in the home, and starting families. And then we also have folks who are joining the church who are grandparents moving closer, or folks who are downsizing in a similar demographic and want to live a little more in town, but not all the way in town. And so those are the folks that are finding their way here. If you show up and the building facade doesn't represent what you think you expected when you come in, then you're out. But the good news is that we keep getting folks coming in who are finding their way here and finding a wonderful place through the schools we offer here at the church, but also through all of our missions programs, everything from the Snack in a Backpack activities, from scouts, all the different ways that this church provides a generous space for people to grow and to learn.
Oh, absolutely. And one of my greatest pleasures of this last year has been, because as I said, my father played the organ and I would love to have a singing voice, but I don't. But John created this thing called an afternoon choir where you really don't have to have a singing voice, but you get to sing anyway. And it's just been lots of fun to see it grow from, like, I think there were 3 at the first meeting.
Yeah.
To we probably had close to 20 this past Tuesday.
Yeah.
We get to sing in church occasionally and stand up where the big choir sings. And it's fun. So, I mean, it just seems like of late we've just been creative, and it's just been wonderful.
And in this season of Advent, anticipating and light and darkness and trying to find the light, there are so many people looking for those connections. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a neighbor down the street, a friend who you could invite to a Christmas service, all these things that are happening in the life of the church that are ways where we're generous with our friends and neighbors, they see that and want to be a part of it. When more of us are generous, more of us become generous. That's kind of how it works in the way of when people are more loving, more people are more loving. That's part of the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so there's so many things to be involved in at church, but I'm grateful for all the ways you've helped us to highlight the generous nature of our people, Madge. So Madge, I know you have a really strong circle of friends here at the church who you do life with here at the church and other places, but can you talk just a little bit about that group and its importance for you?
Well, most of the friendships have developed. One out of going back to the good old United Methodist Women, and then Sunday school, because it's at Sunday school that we can have that leisurely time to visit and talk about how the week was or who's sick or whatever. And because of, back to my original, that it was for people who were single or alone at church, most everybody in there is single. So we have more time to just visit. Every now and then we just have a Sunday where it is visitation time, and you just kind of chatter about what's been going on or what your prayer concerns are or somebody in your family. If you're sick yourself, we've got a pretty close network of, somebody called me earlier today to tell me an update on a cardiac procedure that they need to have, which I will then pass on to the class on Sunday. So we try to stay in communication. We do some things kind of crazy. We decided several years ago when it came down to a Christmas party gathering. For several years, we tried it at people's houses, and that was wonderful. But everybody was just too busy. So then 3 or 4 years ago, we decided that why don't we put it in like February? Everybody will be ready to get together. They'll be looking for something to do. Yeah. And so now we've moved it.
That's awesome.
Till February. So we just do crazy things like that. We don't really have a president, a vice president, and a recording secretary and a treasurer, whatever. I don't know how we hold together except the thing called friendship. We do care about each other and we share. So it's been a wonderful blessing.
And it's so important to have those lifelong connections that you talk about it to church. And for a lot of us who have young children and trying to figure out how to help them have some of that, or nieces or nephews or that part of things, how to help them have that sense of connection. But anytime we can make and help church be enjoyable and fun and meaningful and people feel welcomed and that they belong, then we're already a huge part of the way there for people to hear that good news and hear about Scripture and how it applies for their lives. So yeah, it's great. Well, my last question is if there's anything you're excited for this Christmas.
Because Christmas is different for me. Number one, with no children.
Sure.
Mother and father gone. Brother deceased. Got my nieces and my nephews. But from the days of the old whatever, for me now, it's more of just a personal reflective time. Every other Christmas, I get together with the Watson side of the family.
Okay.
And then they're with their other mates' families.
Gotcha.
So the day of Christmas is not that much to me anymore. It is more just being here at church.
Okay.
And all the church programs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's special, but it's not like it was as a kid. I mean, and my idea of a Christmas present now is when they say, what do you want? I say, the best thing you can do is come take something from me more than give me something. I don't need anything.
Sure. Or give some time together.
Time and for us to learn to live together with love for each other. And that I'm very serious about.
Yeah.
Really trying to get down to don't give a gift that can't be, consumed or used in some way.
Yeah. Well, I think that's beautiful because of the practical nature of that. You knowing enough about yourself to know those are the things you value and to help other people understand that. One of the threads that runs through the modern understanding of Christmas is this very materialistic, more stuff, more things. And the anxiety it produces for everyone about that is real. For parents, for everyone, for people buying stuff for their parents, all the kids, all these things. Unfortunately, it makes us miss out on some of the beautiful parts of Christmas. As people of faith, we're excited about the birth of Jesus. As someone once said, it's Jesus' birthday, not yours.
Right.
But I do love that that's one of your things now for folks who know you and for your family is give me the gift of some of your time or something I can consume or be a part of and have some sort of meaningful experience together.
Right.
There are a lot more people in my age bracket and experience level in life and stage of life who are looking for experiences together with their families or with loved ones or a trip for themselves. That is something that it would be extravagant if I were doing this any other time besides Christmas.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. So Christmas to me is not all the gifts in the boxes stacked under the tree. It is more about the relationships or being able to see and be with people that you love. Or just dropping off a gift and saying, hey,
Yeah.
that's it.
Well, that's beautiful, Madge. Well, thank you for being willing to come on the podcast and chat with me about this here. I know you had your own nervousness and misgivings, but hey, we did it. Well, thank y'all for being here, listening and enjoying the podcast in video form. You can find it in all the different places from Spotify to Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube. There's a video version of this. So if you want to see what Madge and I look like, go on there. But we're glad to be together. Look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the podcast. Again, I'm Joseph. Glad to have our friend Madge Watson with us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Oak Grove is certainly a blessing to me and to many in this entire community. So thank you for all y'all do as staff for us.
Well,
We're blessed.
Honor and a privilege, and it's as we say, it's a mutual admiration. Well, a big thank you to everyone for watching this season of the Advent version of the podcast. We've got another podcast season coming up during the season of Lent. Those are the 40 days, including the Sundays, leading up to Easter and Holy Week in the church. We'll be taking a look at spiritual practices and having some fun guests on the podcast to talk about their spiritual practices. Some that might involve prayer and some typical spiritual disciplines and practices that you might have heard of throughout Christian history, and some that are a little different maybe, about walking or about different ways of engaging our bodies and our spirits and our minds and our full selves in practices that help us more deeply connect with God. So look forward to seeing you in that part in the new year coming up in February, and looking forward to all the things ahead of us in this new year in 2024. So Happy New Year, everybody, and we'll see you next year.